All right, as I mentioned earlier today, the White House announced the United States will not send President Biden or any U.S. government official to the Winter Olympics in Beijing over the Chinese Communist Party's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity. Joining me now to talk about this is one of the first members of Congress to call for the boycott, U.S. Congressman Mike Waltz. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, a decorated Special Forces officer. He serves as the member of Congress for the 16th Congressional District. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you, Tony. Good to be with you.
Let me get your response to the Biden administration's announcement.
Well, first one, I'm happy to see at least some action. As you heard Jen Psaki mention, it really focused on the just gross and disgusting atrocities, not just against the Muslim Uyghurs, but against the Buddhist Tibetans and against Christians all over China, where they're literally, Tony, bulldozing churches, and the Chinese Communist Party is writing their own version and interpretation of the Bible. But it's important to, number one, point out what she didn't mention, which was COVID origins, and the 5 million people that are dead in the Chinese cover-up. She didn't mention Hong Kong. She didn't mention the aggression in the South China Sea and a number of other offenses. And number two, this is a diplomatic boycott. And they're kind of glossing over that part and just emphasizing on the boycott because I think the administration wants to look like it's doing something significant. But I and 180 human rights groups, 180, have called for a full boycott, an economic boycott, and for our athletes. And I want to be clear for those who, my heart goes out to the athletes as well, that we have been asking repeatedly the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, to move the games out of Beijing for years. They have refused to do so, and I just do not see how we have the American flag flying in Beijing after unleashing COVID on the world with an ongoing genocide. And Tony, these companies like Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Intel, Disney, and others that want to preach social justice here in the United States but want to ignore the atrocities that are going on in China are complete hypocrites. We need to call them out for it. And then number two, I'll be candid. I would ask many of these athletes themselves, if the United States, if the U.S. government were imprisoning 1 million Muslims in concentration camps, I guarantee you they would be protesting and not begging to compete. But why then turn a blind eye when it comes to China?
Yeah, and to put this in perspective, 40 years ago, it was a Democratic president, Jimmy Carter, that had a full boycott, if I'm not mistaken, of the Summer Games in Moscow in response to the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. So the president certainly could have taken greater steps here. I think, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that even this step was prompted in part from the actions taken by the Women's Tennis Association that is boycotting all activities, all tennis tournaments in China and Hong Kong as a result of the sexual assault charges that one of their members has made against a Chinese official?
Well, that's exactly right, and my hat goes off to, and I have a call pending with the head of the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association, for their bold stand, for having a spine. This was a significant, their tournaments in China were a significant part of their revenue, but they stood up for their values. And when you have, this would be the equivalent, Tony, of like Serena Williams accusing a vice president of the United States of sexual abuse, and then Serena Williams disappears. Peng Shuai, the Chinese tennis star, was a 3-time Olympian and the number one in the world in doubles, and she has disappeared only to show up in some very scripted, obviously coerced videos. And so good on the WTA for taking a stand, and the NBA, by contrast, is again weak-kneed and turning a blind eye to these gross atrocities. So I do think that's a big piece of it. And the other piece, Tony, very quickly, for all of those who say, well, we shouldn't politicize athletics, and the IOC has repeatedly said, we don't do politics. Well, they didn't take that stand when it came to South Africa and apartheid. They actually banned South Africa for nearly 30 years from not only having an Olympic Games, but even their Olympic team participating in any Olympic Games. So why do they take a tough stand when it comes to South Africa and apartheid, but just ignore an ongoing genocide with 1 million Muslims? I'll answer my own question. It's because of their balance sheet, and it's because of the amount of money involved. It's hypocrisy at its worst. And again, we need to call it out at every turn.
Well, before we move on to the next topic regarding China, I do want to circle back to what you said about the corporate sponsors, because even in the case of the Women's Tennis Association, many of the major sponsors of their efforts, but also of the overall Olympics, have remained silent on all of this and continue, and some of them benefit directly from the forced labor in China.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And, Nike being one of them, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola have been absolutely silent. They are literally participating in modern-day slavery with slave labor, yet then they want to boycott Georgia, right, over social justice and the voter integrity laws they've been passing. So, again, it's hypocrisy at its worst, and it's only because they can be woke in the United States and pad their balance sheet and then be silent when it comes to China and pad their balance sheet. But, again, it's the worst in terms of principles or morals or any type of principled stand.
Congressman Mike Waltz, I want to move on to issues of national defense. A classified American intelligence report suggests China intends to establish its first permanent military presence on the Atlantic Ocean in the tiny Central African country of Equatorial Guinea. But before I get to that, related is the National Defense Authorization Act, which has actually been hung up in the Senate by Senator Marco Rubio over an amendment that he wants into the bill dealing with manufactured goods coming from the region where the Uyghurs are being forced into labor. That has hung up the NDAA bill, which is this annual must-pass piece of legislation funding our military. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I have similar language to Senator Rubio in the defense bill, but it only prohibits the Defense Department rather than the entire U.S. government from buying these slave labor-made goods. But, Senator Rubio has a great point. I mean, the bill passed the Senate, yet Nancy Pelosi won't bring it up. And he's been holding up the defense bill because of it in order to leverage and pressure Pelosi, who leads the Democrat Party and pretends to care about women's rights and human rights and labor rights. But yet, once again, like these corporations, she and her party are completely silent when it comes to real, as we speak right now, modern-day slavery that are making Nike apparel, that are providing sugar to Coca-Cola, that are providing a lot of the cotton to a number of our clothing brands. Listen, folks, when you see made in China, if it is made in Western China, it is likely made at the end of a barrel of an AK-47. Yeah. And it's just gross and disgusting.
And now is the time to think about that as we're in the Christmas season. We're buying various presents and gifts and all kinds of products. I am now turning over everything to see where it is made. Congressman Mike Waltz, we're out of time. Not able to get to this Chinese threat on the Atlantic. We'll have to circle back around and talk about that later. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, God bless, Tony. Thank you.